Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Monica. My pronouns are she and her. I work in inclusion department at MAP, and a very, very warm welcome to everyone on this lovely evening. Many of you already know that MAP has a strong focus on inclusion and accessibility. We take a 360-degree approach, focusing on community development and ensuring that activities at MAP are accessible and inclusive to the best of its core. And about a month and a half ago, we've started our Pride journey, not just to engage queer visitors at MAP, but also to integrate gender inclusivity at its core. And it's safe to say that it's going pretty well, and as a part of it, we have done some wonderful events. And yes, you could also say that every day is a Pride Day at MAP. And today, I bring you this panel discussion from Archive to Activism, Queer Transcultural Work, hosted by our friends at QAMRA, Queer Archive for Memory, Reflection, and Activism. A community archive at National Law School of India University in Bengaluru. Through the lightning talks and a moderator roundtable, they will reflect on the past, present, future in queer transcultural organizing involving distant forms of resistance and joy. And without any further delay, it's an honor to introduce our first moderator and one of our panelists, Siddharth Narayan, who is also an assistant professor of law at National Law School of India University, Bangalore, and a faculty director of QAMRA project. Please join me in welcoming Siddharth.
Thank you, Monica, Sushma, and the team at MAP for hosting this event. I'll only be just moderating today, moderating the discussion, but we have a really nice, good panel for fantastic speakers who I'll be introducing one by one. So the way that this will go is that each of the speakers will speak for 10 to 12 minutes. And then after that, we'll gather here and we'll have a quick discussion. And then we'll open it out for questions. Some of them have slides, so we're not blocking the way, so we've kept this free so you can see this. And I think at QAMRA, we've been involved with a couple of public events over the last month or two over Pride, and some of you have come to those before. But this, I think it's the first time that we're doing anything at MAP, so we're quite excited to be here. And the idea was that we bring together different perspectives of people working in this area, those engaged in community activism, cultural work, academia, knowledge production, and have a conversation between them to get a sense of what is the kind of work happening on the ground, happening in different fields in this area, and to stage a conversation, hopefully that will be productive. And I invite you all to join that once they actually speak. So we will, without further ado, begin with our first speaker for today, Dr. Kush Patel, who heads the Masters of Arts program at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, and is an associate professor there. So I'll invite you, Kush, to start us off with your presentation.
So thank you everyone for coming on a Sunday evening, joining us at this event, which is both a set of lightning talks, as Siddharth mentioned, but also a panel discussion from Archive to Activism, Queer and Transcultural Work. Thank you for getting us started at tonight's panel, Siddharth, and thank you to MAP for making this event possible. In particular, Monica Nellani, Sushma Rao, and Brianne Quelho, with whom we've been communicating over the past few weeks and who've been generous enough with their time and attention to details through and through. I want to begin with 3 images. The first image was taken earlier this year in April in the context of a transdisciplinary research cycle at the Just Futures CoLab. What you see in perspective is a standing figure of one of my students, Anu, discussing an episode of Nia Nana, a recorded television program published on YouTube on June 9th, 2014, where Tirunangai Sudha talks about the nature of a Tirunangai's love and the ways in which she loves. In Anu's annotation, Sudha describes how a Tirurangai can feel like a mother and be a mother even though she cannot birth a child herself. And this annotation is an integral part of Anu's inquiry entitled To Birth, where she recontextualizes the phrase to birth to unpack, in her words, quote, its ties to patriarchal bodily regimes, as well as its capacity in world building, chosen family building, as in co-birth, for queer and trans peoples, and Tirunangai girl. Also in this image, seated at the red table, are 4 other lab members, Anvesha, Aishan, Shay, and Ruhani. The second image was taken in November of last year. Pinned to the wall of the lab are a set of 3 prints laid side by side, covering 10 thickly annotated principles of the 2019 Feminist Data Manifest No project, co-authored by Marika Sifor, Patricia Garcia, T.L. Cohen, Jasmine Rault, Tonya Sutherland, Anita Seichan, Jennifer Rode, Anna Lauren Hoffman, Nilufer Salehi, and Lisa Nakamura. Consider the principle number 3, which is at the bottom left of the screen. The principle states, and I read, we refuse the use of data about people in perpetuity. We commit to embracing agency and working with intentionality, preparing bodies or corpuses of data to be laid to rest when they are not being used in service to the people about whom they were created, end quote. With this principle, I find myself returning to the question of what constitutes a queer archive. I annotate on this sheet, since the inception of this project Space and Inquiry, I've asked questions of the archive from a queer and trans feminist and an anti-colonial lens, as a way to also inscribe myself and ourselves into the making and maintenance of the archive, as well as with and for whom the archive is made. The specificity of born digital archival records, which is also a core area of my research, however, makes this concern urgent, inviting us to hold in memory both known and yet to be known lives. Lives lost, lives outside social and digital defaults, lives who may never be remembered or considered worthy of remembering from those social and technological centers, and lives becoming themselves fully in and via the digital. The specificity of born digital records additionally makes this concern important, enabling me to argue that this record and archive too will and should have an end, and an ending at all levels of its construction as we keep in view and remain vigilant about what is the data doing and what is the data ceasing to do in the world with an eye toward queer and trans flourishing, queer and trans futurity. The third image is that of an off-campus pop-up lab from May this year. The view frames individuals engaging with interactive artistic hypertexts on one side and an endless scroll of digital humanities index on the other side. Hypertexts are non- or multilinear pathways through text that offer each reader a deeply personal experience of reading and interacting with that text. Variously titled as To Birth by Anu, To Author One's Body by Anvesha, Nameless by Aishan, Patterns by Ruhani, and Milk Logic by Shay, these computer-based interactions animated each student's inquiry lines as developed and deepened over 5 weeks, namely, Anu on a rhizome of queer and trans texts, sounds, peoples, images, and networks, Anvesha on authoring bodies, authoring feminisms, Aishan on self-projections, trans records, and female voices, Ruhani on neuropatterns, a non-conforming body in a conformed world, and Shay on holding the grotesque closely and with critical intimacy. Together, these images mark my ongoing praxis of building intentional communities of research creation and keeping alive the questions that Blue Buchanan and I had asked in our 2018 published writing on Dodgy Scholars. Or what might it mean to be hypervisible or invisible in our collaborative, committed, and transformative university work? How the question of visibility shapes our current practices and perspectives, and how the same question might introduce new ways of developing not just a society of scholar activists, teachers, and hybrid professionals, including archivists and artists, but also a richer commons, which sees a subverting of these troubles and siloed professions in our everyday lives. We are dodgy scholars, or this is how we introduced ourselves in this writing. We rupture normative expectations of productivity and scholarly impact by actively working on the frayed edges of a disrupting lab to further research through embodied and situated making that is reviewed in community. The tightrope walk of a subversive scholar is in the details, and with these details, we dodge being domesticated by the institution. The Just Futures CoLab is a space for digital humanities research and teaching, but one that also navigates this question of visibility with care and with intention. It is a critical space for critical praxis, an undercommons, if you will, to borrow from Fred Moten and Stefano Harney's work, for queer and trans cultural organizing. Since its inception in 2021, the lab has produced discourse and scholarship on equity and justice through critical pedagogy. Consider, for example, the studios and care matters in justice streams, centering biographical critiques on the left, and inquiring into the relationship between coding, weaving, and storytelling on the right. Through archives, bibliographies, and databases, hold in view, for example, the seminar on archives and social justice on the left, and thinking with community resources, zines, and anti-caste scholarship on the right. And on interactive digital storytelling, see, for example, the ongoing process of archiving materials that are exclusively digital with T. Jayashree at QAMRA on the left, and inquiring into queer and trans feminist digital technologies through critical making on the right. And I'll just leave the slide for a bit, which indexes a range of activities that are currently happening in the lab, from thinking of songs and songwriting themselves as scholarly citations, to thinking about critical interactive hypertext prototypes, to also producing an index of digital humanities works that span a spectrum of works from the community as well as in universities. Our works are multilingual and multi-sited. Consider the spread of texts we read in community as part of the Feminist Solidarities Reading Circle in Covent Park. Our worlds are multi-threaded. Feel these woven gendered critiques of anti-surveillance that artists and scholars like Jacqueline Bernimont have called data visceralization. The caption reads, from left to right, Big Pharma and Big Tech in and through the QR code by Preeti Dongani, Predictive Casteist Policing and Wearable Technology by Tanima Jaju, and Women Garment Factory Workers and Workplace Surveillance by Effie Fernandez. And our process is structurally and intentionally slow and archival. Take a look at the spreadsheet of archival description involving born digital materials connected to feminist care work. It's in the details, again, that the subversive potential of the scholarship lies. Together, they help to bring into view a set of questions that I constantly ask myself and my students. What ethical and political issues become significant when queer and trans lives are inscribed in these materials, or when such materials have direct consequences for queer and trans everydayness? How might we research images, texts, sound files, and even videos connected to either an event or a period of cultural and technological significance? And what does it mean to verify the authenticity of this material in the age of misinformation and disinformation, and to advocate around its enduring value as a record from an archival perspective? This work is cultural organizing work. It is slow engagement work that challenges the binaries of culture and politics, art and activism, theory, and practice. I come to this work with a background in an ongoing practice in critical librarianship and the digital humanities, where cultural organizing is also about analyzing power, both critically and creatively towards data and bodily sovereignty, about stewarding a space and knowledge infrastructure for cultural critique and resistance, and about actualizing, in Bell Hooks's words, education as a practice of freedom. The Just Futures Collab is a space, a room within an institution, but it is also a collective, a curriculum, and a trusting bond I continue to build with learners across deliberate and diverse campus community locations. And what you see on this slide is a partial archive of the monthly letters that I write from the lab called Felt Notes, which enable me to not just share the ongoings of research creations, but also extend the lab into known and soon-to-be-known readers, both translocally and transnationally. By sharing with you today a set of works, processes, and tools also brings me to illustrate what cultural organizing can be, or what it means to talk back at the colonial trappings of expertise that come with being an academic, artist, and an archivist with a capital A, especially for those of us grounded in anti-colonial community-centered work, and more importantly, attuned to what care labor is and how it has historically been distributed across sites of knowledge, from archives to activism, with archives as activism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kush. It was really fantastic because I've been to the Just Futures lab, which we did a workshop and a class actually at Srishti a month ago, but I didn't know the extent to which the kind of work that they're doing is fascinating, and I guess we'll get to that in the discussion. So now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Uma. So Uma P. Has been a member of the transgender community with 24 years of experience in legal, societal, and media advocacy work on human rights and social entitlements of sexual and gender minorities. I know Uma for quite a long time now, especially for my work at the Alternative Law Forum. So yes, so it's a privilege to have you here. So I invite Uma to. Uma will be speaking in Kannada. I'll try to do a short kind of maybe a little bit of the short points that Uma is covering, but please try and follow as much as possible so that so Uma, I'll leave it up to you.
Jai Bhim ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಉಮಾ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಇಂಟ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಾನು ಕಳೆದ ಒಂದು 24 ಇಯರ್ಸಿಂದ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನನ್ನ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾಯಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಾನು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು 24 ವರ್ಷದ ಜರ್ನಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹಿಂದೆ ತಿರುಗಿ ನೋಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ಹೋರಾಟ ಅನ್ನೋದು ತುಂಬ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪಾತ್ರನ ವಹಿಸಿದೆ. ಅದು ಹೋರಾಟ ಅಂತ ನೋಡುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಬರೀ ಗ್ರೌಂಡಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬ್ಯಾನರ್ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಪೋಸ್ಟರ್ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋರಾಟ ಮಾಡೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು ಹೋರಾಟ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲ ಹ್ಯಾಂಗಲಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ನಾವು ಲೀಗಲ್ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್ನ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಅಂದರೆ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಲಿಟಿಗೇಷನ್ನ ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾನವ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳು ಹೇಗೆ ಉಲ್ಲಂಘನೆಗಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಬೆಳಕು ಚೆಲ್ಲಿ ಪಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಹೋರಾಟನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಹೋರಾಟ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮೀಡಿಯಾಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ಆದಂಥ ಲೈಂಗಿಕ ದೌರ್ಜನ್ಯಗಳಿರ್ಬಹುದು ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ಫ್ಯಾಮ್ಲಿಯಿಂದ ಆಗುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ದೌರ್ಜನ್ಯಗಳಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಹಾಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಂದ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಜಾಗಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮೀಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಬರೋದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಹೋರಾಟ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಚಾರನ ಯಾವಾಗ ನಾವು ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಜೊತೆ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಅದನ್ನು ನೋಡಿ ಜನ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಮಾಹಿತಿಗಳನ್ನ ತಗೊಳ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಮಾಹಿತಿಗಳು ಒಬ್ರಿಗೆ ಹರಡುವಂಥದ್ದು ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ತುಂಬ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದಂಥ ಪಾತ್ರ ವಹಿಸುತ್ತೆ ಸಮಾಜ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಪ್ರಕ್ರಿಯೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಹೋರಾಟ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಬಯಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಸುಮಾರು ಸಾರಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ದೌರ್ಜನ್ಯಗಳು ಆದಾಗ ನಾವು ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಸಾರಿ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ತರಬೇಕು ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗದೇ ಇರುವಂಥ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ತರಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಸಮುದಾಯ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅಂದರೆ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡುವಾಗ ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೋರಾಟ ಮತ್ತು ಸಪೋರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಈ ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಕೆಲವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನಪ್ಪ ಇದು ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ನು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಅಂದಾಗ ಒಂದು ಸಮುದಾಯ ಆಗಿ ನನಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ ನನಗೆ ಯಾರ್ದಾದ್ರೂ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ನ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯವರು ಎದುರು ನೋಡ್ತಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ನಾವು ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥವರು ಆ ಒಂದು ಸಪೋರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ನ ನಾವು ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸನ ನಾವು ಮುಂದುವರಿಸ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಕ್ರೈಸಸ್ ಆಗಿರಬಹುದು, ಅದು ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ನರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಗೂಂಡಾಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಹೀಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸ್ ಇಂಟರ್ವೆನ್ಷನ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 24 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥವ್ರು ನಾವು ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ನ ನಾವು ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ನ ಕೊಡುವಂಥ ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಗೆ ನಾವು ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಆಗಿನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ನಾವು ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ನಂದು SSLC ಫೇಲ್, ನನಗೆ ಎಜುಕೇಷನ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ರೂರಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆನ ಕಟ್ಟಿ ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ತೊಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಾನು ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ನಾನು ಕಾಂಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಆತ್ಮಸ್ಥೈರ್ಯ ಮತ್ತು ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಗೋಲ್ ನನಗೆ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ನನಗೆ ಇರ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಅದು ಯಾಕೆ ಇರ್ತಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಬಾಲ್ಯ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ಲೈಫ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಅನುಭವಿಸಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ರಿಜೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ನನಗೆ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟಂಥ ಟಾರ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ನನಗೆ ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಒಂದು ಸಪೋರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಇಲ್ಲದೇ ಇರೋವಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾನು ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನನಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿದ್ದು, ಹೌದು ನಾನು ಸಮುದಾಯ ಆಗಿ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಮೊದಲು ನನಗೆ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬರೇ ಇರೋದು, ಬೇರೆ ನಂತರ ಸಮುದಾಯ ಯಾರು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ನಾನು ರೂರಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳೆದಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸಮುದಾಯದೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ನಾನು ಬಂದಾಗ, ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಆಕ್ಯುಪೇಷನ್ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಸೆಕ್ಸ್ ವರ್ಕು ಮತ್ತು ಬೇಗಿಂಗ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಏನೂ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಎರಡನ್ನೂ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನ ನಾನು ಫೇಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ, ಆ ನೋವು ನನ್ನ ಹಿಂದೆ ಬರುವಂಥ ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ನೋವು ಬರಬಾರ್ದು, ನಾನೇನಾದರೂ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಆತ್ಮಸ್ಥೈರ್ಯ ಇವತ್ತು ನಾನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋದಿರಬಹುದು, ಅಥವಾ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆನ ಮುಂದೆ ತೊಗೊಂಡೋಗೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಎಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೂ ನನಗೆ ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿಯಾದಂಥದ್ದು ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೇಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಇದು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರೀ ನಮಗೆ ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿ ಅದೊಂದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ರೂಮಿ ಹರೀಶ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಸುನೀಲ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಹಾಗೆ ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ರೇವತಿ, ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವಾರು ಜನ ನಾವು ಸಮುದಾಯದವರು ಒಂದೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಬಂದು ನಾವು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸನ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಯಿತು. ಮತ್ತು ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಒಂದೊಂದು ಸಾರಿ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ, ಏನು LGBT ಮೂಮೆಂಟ್ ಅನ್ನೋದೊಂದು ಇದೆ, ಆ ಮೂಮೆಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಕೊಂಡಾಗ, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಹೋರಾಟಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಅವರ ಪಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರುವಂಥ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಏನಿದೆ, ಇವೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದಾಗ, ಆ್ಯಸ್ ಎ LGBT ಮೂಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದಷ್ಟನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸಾಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಬಂದಂಥ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ಜಾಗ ಸಿಗ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ನನ್ನ ಸಮುದಾಯದವರು ಕ್ರೈಸಿಸಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಶೆಲ್ಟ್ರ್ ಕೊಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾರು ಮುಂದೆ ಬರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾವು ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ರ್ಯಾಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಹೋಗಿ ಓರಿಯೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾನು ಇದು ನೀನು ಕೇಳಬೇಕು. ಆವಾಗ ನಮಗೆ ಭಯ ಇರ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಯಾರನ್ನಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂಥರ ನಮಗೆ ಒಳಗಡೆನೇ ಒಂಥರ ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಸೋದು, ಅವ್ರು ಯಾವ ಥರ ನೋಡ್ತಾರೋ, ಈ ಥರದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ನಮಗೆ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಹಂಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತು ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಮಿಷ್ನರ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಎಲ್ಲೇ ನಾವು ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಫಿಷಿಯಲ್ ಆಫೀಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮಗೂ ಡಿಗ್ನಿಟಿ ಇದೆ ರೀ. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಡಿಗ್ನಿಟಿ ಜೀವನ ಇದೆ, ನಮಗೂ ಡಿಗ್ನಿಟಿ ಇದೆ. ನಾವು ಡಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸೆಕ್ಷುವಲ್ ಓರಿಯೆಂಟೇಷನು, ನಮ್ಮ ಜೆಂಡರ್ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ನೋ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ಯು ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೀ. ಆ ಥರದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಮಾತಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ಉತ್ಸಾಹ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೋರಾಟ, ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನದ ಅನುಭವ, ಮತ್ತು ನೀವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಬುಕ್ಗಳು ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇಷ್ಟು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಇದ್ದಾವೆ, ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ, ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಒಂದು ಇಷ್ಟು ಬುಕ್ಸನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಸಮುದಾಯ ಆಗಿ ಹೊರ ತಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಐ ಆಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಪ್ರೌಡ್ ಮೈ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಆ್ಯಸ್ ಎ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ ವಿಮೆನ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಇಷ್ಟು ತೊಗೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಐ ಆಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಪ್ರೌಡ್. ಮತ್ತು ನನಗೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು, ಏನು ನಾನು ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನನಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ನಾನೇನು ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ನನಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮದು ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ತುಂಬ ಮುಖ್ಯ. ಯಾಕಂತೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ನಮ್ಮ ಜನ್ರೇಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡುವಾಗ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ಇದೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯವರಿಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇನ್ನೂ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸೇಯಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಆಲ್ ಫ್ರೀಡಮ್ ವಿ ಗಾಟ್, ಬಟ್ ದೆರ್ ಇಸ್ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ problem is there we are facing in regular basis, but compared to previous and now there is difference we are seeing it. ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಯಾವತ್ತೂ ಮರಿಬಾರ್ದು. ಮತ್ತು ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಬರಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣ ಯಾರು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡುವಾಗ ಏನು ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಇಂದಿನ ಹೋರಾಟಗಾರರಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಪಾತ್ರ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದೆ. ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಹೋರಾಟದ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಗಳು, ಆ ಹೋರಾಟದ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಗಳೇನಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ ಇವಾಗಿನ ಒಂದು ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಸಮುದಾಯದವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದರಿಂದ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾನು ಬೆಳಕಾಯಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಮತ್ತು ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಈ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಚರ್ಚೆಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಆರ್ಕೈವ್, ಈಗ ನಾನು ಏನು ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಹೋರಾಟದ ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆಗಳು ಅಷ್ಟು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿದಾಗಿ ದಾಖಲೆಗಳಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತು ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದ್ವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಕೆಲವರು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಂಟ್ರಿದಲ್ಲ, ಲೆಸ್ಬಿಯನಿಸಮ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಅವರ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೀಸ್, ಇಸ್ ವೆಸ್ಟರ್ನ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೀಸ್, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಸೇಯಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್. ಬಟ್ ಅದು ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಇದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಅದೇ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಲೆಸ್ಬಿಯನಿಸಮ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗ ಆ ಥರ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದೇ ನಾವು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ ವಿಮೆನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮಹಾಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಇದ್ವಿ ಅಥವಾ ರಾಮಾಯಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ವಿ, ನಾವು ಆಶೀರ್ವಾದ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯದು ಅಂದರೆ ಕಾಲಿಗೆ ಬೀಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಆ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಜೀವನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಆ ಜೀವನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಸಿವ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿನ ನಾವು ನಿರ್ಮಾಣ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಕೈ ಜೋಡಿಸಿ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ನನ್ನ ಮಾತನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಜೈ ಭೀಮ್, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Okay, so thank you, Uma, for that fantastic presentation. And okay, so what I'm going to do, just a couple of points, okay, because I'm not going to be able to do a word-for-word translation like that. But I think from what I understood, the base, some of the points that Uma is trying to bring forward is that some of the history of the struggle here in Bangalore and Karnataka, and that the fact that the work that Uma has been involved with through Jiva and through her work with work with activism at the grassroots level over here has involved not just It has involved all kinds of interventions, including interventions in the media, highlighting what is actually happening on the ground, and not just only protesting and holding banners, etc. Right? So part of the struggle is about that, how to highlight what is going on. And crisis intervention is something that Uma highlighted, particularly both as a struggle and as a support system, as a particular mode of intervention that they were involved with, which is very particular and I think distinct to Bangalore in some ways. Also, Uma spoke about her personal journey, the fact that she comes from a rural background and not as privileged background, has now grown to founding an organization now to the level where she's also giving sessions and educational sessions, etc., advocacy sessions with police commissioner at the level of the police commissioner, and telling them that, look, our lives also have dignity, and this is what you should be doing. Right? So it's quite a journey that she has come through, and part of this journey has been both through the LGBT rights activism prism, but also in relation to the women's rights movement. And starting with a position where they barely had a chance to find a place to meet, now we've come a long way, where Uma is giving public talks, is speaking and doing the sections, etc. And I guess she then ends, also talked about the community, people like Rumi over here, and the community of people who have helped with that journey, and ended with saying that a lot has happened, a lot of change has happened. We should not forget the history of activism that has happened, the people who have been involved. There's been a generational shift now. And in that process, sometimes we forget what came before and what has happened before. It's important that we remember. The archive is one way of doing it. And it's important that we record this history. Because in some ways, at one level, people will say that where do LGBTQIA plus people come from? Lesbianism is not Indian, etc. And the other level, we also have this other extreme where saying transgender people are in our Hindu mythology and we should fall at their feet, etc. So, but exactly how do we portray and preserve this history? That's a question. So I've just covered some of the points, but maybe discussion nalli enadru bandre, enadru miss madidre ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿ. Okay, and maybe somebody in the audience can also bring I'm sure your Kannada might be slightly better than mine. So okay, so let's move on to the third speaker we have, who's Manvi Atri at the Alternative Law Forum, who has been doing really interesting work at the level of legal activism, both advising people in the LGBT community, doing a number of interesting things. And I request Manvi to tell us a little bit about her experience doing legal activism here, what are the kinds of issues that she's dealing with, etc. Yes, I'll invite you to speak.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, QAMRA, and MAP for organizing this. I actually want to start with something that Umi left us with. That's the part about, Umi said this one sentence about young people often forget where we have come from and how we are in the situation that we are. Yes, there are still struggles today. But what are these struggles and how do these struggles look very different for the young people today? And the reason I want to start from this is because, like Siddharth said, we're at a time where we're seeing a shift even within the way we look at the politics of the queer movement, at the aspirations of the queer movement, at what is it that the people who are queer are looking for in terms of rights, right? There's a shift that's been experienced. And I want to start with giving an example of one particular child with the mother that came to us. So this is actually, I got a call 2 months ago, and on the phone was a mother saying, I want to come and get the name and gender change done. I said, okay. First of all, I was like, this is shocking. Why is a parent calling me? This is not normal. Usually people call me when they're running away from their parents. Why are they calling me as a parent from, saying, okay. I said, okay, you want to get the name and gender change done? Okay. Okay, you said it's urgent. Why is it urgent? She was like, my daughter is turning 18 tomorrow. I said, okay. So she said, as soon as she turns 18, I want her to be able to identify as a woman. I said, okay, fantastic, sure. So initially after that phone call, I said, sure, come to office and meet us, and we'll help you, we'll guide you through the name and gender change process. But after the phone call, it took me some time to recalibrate to what just happened. Did a parent just call me saying that it's the birthday of my child, and my child identifies as a girl, and she was assigned male at birth. So this is really what I want to do for her birthday. So I shared this with some of my colleagues, and we were all still wondering, okay, we should just meet them and see, what's happening. So we met them. We met the parents with the child, who had then turned 18, so she could make decisions on her own about her life, about her name. And it was the most enduring experience as a lawyer to sit there in a meeting room where she was sitting and wondering, how should my new signature look? Now I'm 18, now I can be a woman, and what should my signature look like, right? Just a day after that, we got another phone call from another mother saying, my daughter is 9 years old, and I want to get her passport changed to a trans person. I said, okay, this is becoming shocking now. two people in 2 days, what's going on? And when we met the mother, she told us about the kind of small changes she was observing in her child from the age of 3, and how she was observing different aspects of gender dysphoria that the child was experiencing and expressing very differently, in the way that they were dressing, in the way that they wanted to be spoken to, in the way that they wanted to be dressed and addressed, their choice of colors, the choice of cartoon shows that they wanted to watch, and who they were associating to. And it was really a moment where I just took a step back and took a huge long sigh, because I did not imagine that in just 5 years of being a part of this kind of work, I would experience this, where we would have 2 supportive mothers come forward to say, we want to support our children. And the reason this mother came at the age of 9 also was, she said she's getting counseling support. I'm taking her to therapy. She's having support in school, right? So to really witness that has been a joy that I've been carrying with me in my stomach, driving me to do this work. And that's been witnessed only because of the decades and decades of work of people like Umi, Rumi, Siddharth, and the many, many people who I won't even know, because like, Umi said, and like Kush also said, that there's some lives that often end up not being remembered simply because we didn't know them, right? So this question of history, and this question of how do we write this history in a way that also defines the present and the future. And for me, a lot of the work that's come before me, and a lot of the work that ALF has also been part of, which is the organization I work with, in some senses is work that's been built to and brought to a place where now when I come in, I get to have the luxury to imagine a future. And that imagination of a future and the being in the present is the gift of that work of the community and decades of work. And so I wanted to actually read out one part of a poem that we had done as an introduction for the booklet after the marriage equality judgment came out, which many of us were disappointed by. Because, of course, equally as many people here, we were also very disappointed. But also at that point of time, some of my other colleagues told me that, there was a time when we were decriminalized and recriminalized again. So if there is a community that knows how to fight, it is the queer community. If there is a community that has fought hard for its rights, it is the queer community. So it's a poem by Langston Hughes which goes, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? And the dream is really, when I talk about the futures, because I want to connect the conversation that we've been having about the past to imagining a future, is that when I look at the legal framework and the possibilities within the legal framework today, I see it's the rights of people within the queer community have been recognized in a way, in a very short period of time, that other communities have had to struggle to really get those rights in the same time context, right? Like the marriage equality decision came in a matter of months, right? Even though it was not something that was favorable to the community. So when you look at the future and the imagination, I want to talk about it in the context of infinite possibilities and 5 particular aspects of it, right? If we want to have a dignified life, what is it that we want from the state and from people around us, right? If we want a dignified life, a right to equality, non-discrimination, and that equality does not manifest in not being violently attacked, but treated equally, right? Now, many people here in the room, including myself, have been critiques of the Trans Persons Protection of Rights Act, right? Now, what I do find revealing, though, is that this is a question I like asking now, because I've realized that it's true for many of us. How many people here have read the Trans Persons Protection of Rights Act? Okay, that's still a marginal minority, I would say. What I find most remarkable about the Trans Persons Protection of Rights Act is that starting from prohibition of discrimination to the 5 aspects that I said I was going to talk about, the 5 aspects being partnership rights, healthcare, education, employment, and housing. If you look at all of them, leaving apart partnership rights, the other 4 aspects, which is your aspect of education, employment, housing, and healthcare, the Act does a fantastic job of at least recognizing that these rights exist and they cannot be taken away by the state. You cannot be discriminated even by private parties as per the Act when it comes to housing. I understand that the experience, of course, and I'm acutely aware of how the experience is so different from this dream. But the reason I'm talking about these 4 aspects and just this one aspect of the judgment that many of you may have heard about, which is Anand Venkatesh's judgment with respect to granting 2 people in a relationship, a lesbian couple, protection. And there have been many, many cases like that in the High Court where families have approached saying that my child has run away and you need to get them back because they're queer. But what was very remarkable and different in this case is that Anand Venkatesh not just went through sensitization himself to understand what are queer people and who are they and how do you even understand their concerns, but instead of forcing the family to meet or to not meet, instead of just mediating and adjudicating it as a judge, there was a humane aspect to the way he adjudicated the case, because he allowed for time of the adult children and their parents half an hour time to discuss and explain, where they come from. And all of them reached a consensus that the couple shall be allowed to live by themselves. So it's not just in the future that I'm talking about, is some part of it, of course, is in the law, I would imagine, I would hope. But some part of it is also in the way of realizing these rights. So when it comes to the 4 aspects that I was talking about, housing, healthcare, education, and employment, all 4 of these aspects, when you specifically look at housing, you have a scheme in Karnataka. When you look at healthcare, Umi and I were just talking how there has supposed to be a comprehensive insurance scheme which is supposed to provide hormonal therapy, laser therapy, SRS, in an insurance scheme which is subsidized and is free for the community. It's supposed to provide, when that's with respect to healthcare. With respect to employment, we have 1% horizontal reservation in all public opportunities in Karnataka. When it comes to healthcare, housing, employment, what did I miss? Education, yes. Education after the, again, in a WP that was filed, a writ petition that was filed last year by a student who had applied to NLS for a seat because there was no reservation for trans persons there. They have given in NLS a 0.5% reservation with respect to education itself. So, and all of this has happened through protest, through historical struggle, and also in using the law creatively in some ways, and in involving people and taking away the stigma and addressing the stigma that has long been carried. So yeah, I just want to end with just one part about the Navtej Singh Johar judgment that some of us forget, I feel, and I feel an onus to read that part out loud in terms of the sentiment of apology that was written in the Navtej Singh Johar judgment, and how it pointed to the future, and how the apology didn't just mean the past, but it also meant a future. So Justice Indu Malhotra writes, history was an apology to the members of this community and their families for the delay in providing the redressal for this ignominy and ostracism that they've suffered long through centuries. Justice Chandrachud puts it as, it is difficult to right the wrongs of history, but we can certainly set the course for the future. And that we can do by saying, as I propose in this case, that lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders have a constitutional right to equal citizenship in all its manifestations. So, however, an apology only has meaning if one wants it for it to atone the wrongdoing. Apology is not about the past, it's about the future, and it should really provide us a pathway for the future. So I will end here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manvi, for that, and really setting forth the on an optimistic note, the road for the future, right? And for us to also think of the possible creative ways of the use of the law, and also think about possibly where the recording of the past and the archive, the role of the archive when it comes to that. Now, for our 4th and final panelist, Meera Bruno, who's an archivist and visual artist, currently with the QAMRA project, probably the one that will most directly deal with the archive itself. So I invite Meera to come and speak.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to Siddharth for introducing me, and to Siddharth and Kush for organizing this, and to MAP and everyone who works here for so generously accommodating us and having us. Hi, I'm Meera. I work as an archivist at the QAMRA project at the moment. And I'm quite new to this role, and some of you have been involved with this project for quite a long time. So if I say things that are not in line with the history, feel free to correct me. I have put together some slides. They bear no real relation to my presentation beyond to show you some pictures of what's in the archives, but if you have any questions about them, feel free to ask. So I'll just click the clicker at random. So yeah, this is a banner from, I think, around 2006. So I'll tell you a little bit about the QAMRA archive. So I'll start with what we have in our holdings, and then get into the history a little bit. QAMRA, the three largest collections in the QAMRA archive at the moment are the what we call the queer legal collection, which mostly pertains to material to do with the reading down of 377, though also includes NALSA, marriage equality, and we're looking to expand that as well. It contains judgments, but also research. We got a lot of materials from the Alternative Law Forum and from the offices of Jawahar Raja, so a lot of kind of behind the scenes of how the case functioned that sort of builds up a picture from 92 to the present for the rights of what was at one time called sexuality minorities, and now I think queer people. Then we also have the Sangama newspaper collection, starting in about 1999 and ending in about 2018. It is this organization NGO called Sangama was tasked with collecting newspaper clippings that had anything to do with sexuality, yes, queerness and transness, but also just sexuality generally, from Bangalore, from around the late 90s to 2018. This forms a kind of amazing collection of views and perspectives in different languages across time, across different publications, to do with the struggle for rights, but also just generally a kind of snapshot in time. A lot of different articles will be presented slightly different in different publications or different languages. And we also have the T. Jayashree video collection, which spans from about 2002 or 3 to around 2018-ish, with some, I could be slightly wrong about the date. So the filmmaker T. Jayashree, this is some cataloging. So the filmmaker T. Jayashree starting during the process for making a film entitled Many People, Many Desires, which some of you may have seen recently. It started making interviews and films about the lives of queer people and trans people, mostly in and around Bangalore, though all over India, and then continued the project after that. The film came out in 2004, but continued doing an oral history project after that, well into the 2010s, and we have preserved the footage of that as well as transcripts, forming a kind of oral history project on the people's opinions, their feelings, their thoughts during the struggle for the reading down of 377 for the most part. And also, I think an interesting aspect of that collection is that there's a lot of interest and focus on class and discussion of class and sexuality early in that film. So we continue to collect material. There's also a lot I haven't mentioned, but I could talk all evening, so if I get too much into the details, so I won't. So collecting is ongoing, and my focus is mostly on cataloging the material we already have and making it more accessible to the public and to researchers. So I'll tell you a little about the history of QAMRA. So the idea for it began in around 2012 by Siddharth Narayan, who's here tonight, partly, or it's sort of a many-stranded history. When Kaushal versus Naz, it looked as though there was an increasing focus on evidence and on the judicial focus, language began minimizing and denying the existence of homosexuality of queer people in the Indian context. So Siddharth Narayan and Tripti Tripathi, who were working on that case, began to see the importance of creating a accessible history of the existence of queer people in India. In 2013, a conference on queer archiving was held. And then the idea continued to develop into 2017, where at the urging of Pani Arasu, the kind of cataloging of T.J. Shree's video collection began, mostly with students from St. Joseph's at the time. So if any of you here from St. Joseph's, some of your seniors will have cataloged early on. Then in 2021, the QAMRA archive moved to the campus of NLSIU in order to develop a more stable and forward-looking kind of archive with a kind of solid infrastructure for the years to come. Yeah, so that's a short history of QAMRA, which stands for the Queer Archive for Memory, Reflection, and Activism, by the way. I didn't say that, and I always forget. I'll talk now a little bit about the role of archives into the future and in activism going forward. So I think, as Uma was talking about, and as was sort of noted in 2012, evidence and documentation of queer life is very important because part of many people's queer experience is isolation, uprootment, and distantiation from community or difficulty finding community, at least initially. This makes it harder to preserve a continuity, a history, and a collective past as well as an individual past. So I think there's a great importance in preserving and making available this history so that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel, so we can look on what has been done in the past and draw from that and make our future looking towards the activism of the past. Additionally, I think that as many of you have mentioned, the great strides have been made in the last 30 years in the legal rights of trans and queer people. And this, while certainly socially and legally there may be a long way to go, it should not be discounted, the speed, the efficiency, and the energy that has gone into this, and the effectiveness of the movement and this struggle. Yesterday I gave a workshop here at MAP, and some of you from that workshop are here today, so thank you for coming. One of the participants, Praveen, who's here today, made the astute point that archives, or I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the astute point that archives allow us to see the past and think about the past, but don't tell us where to go from here. The history doesn't provide a roadmap, and I think this is a very important insight. So from that we can glean. We can look to the lessons of the past and extrapolate from there what we do or don't want to carry with us, what we want to take from it, and how to deal with the challenges of the future based on how our predecessors and our colleagues and our friends have dealt with the challenges of the past. But we should not forget the existence of this struggle that has been ongoing. Then the archive also has a memorial function, that is to remember those who are no longer with us, and to have a collective place and repository for collecting those memories and for sharing them. Manvi, what you said about I will reiterate what you said about the luxury to imagine the future. In imagining the future, we must remember the past that made it possible, and I think that the function of the archive kind of allows us to do that and reach kind of from the present both into the past and into the future. Yeah, so these are going to be a little hard to read, but I wanted to give you a picture of what's in the archive and what types of materials are held there. Yeah, so these are, yeah. Yeah, I think this is from 2008, and Yeah, so this clicker, QAMRA going forward we're working towards, as I said, we're working on cataloging more of our material so that we can more accessibly say what we hold and have people be able to look at it and engage with it. We're also working towards finding ways of continuing to be active parts of the larger Bangalore queer community. That can fall into the background a little bit when we're in the Excel spreadsheets, in the Godrej cupboard, going through the papers, but we would like to continue to be visible and be part of this. We especially want to focus on those who are represented in our archive, maintaining our links to the people whose activism is represented there. We recently held a metadata on the representation of trans people in our archive, which was really very valuable to us. Some of you who were in that archive, in that conference are here today, and so thank you for that. And we're hoping to continue this kind of engagement, also not just in public engagement, but also bring the relationship with our community into how we actually function on a technical level as an archive. Those are kind of things we think about as we build our budget for the next year. And I bring up the budget to say we want to set our aims and we want to make them concrete with how we plan our resources and our logistics. And I will finish by saying it's an honor to be involved in this project and preserving the histories of the movement and the people in it who made it possible for me and for so many of us to live openly. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Meera. Meera and I work closely with each other, and at the archive, but we don't really get the opportunity to reflect about archiving and its role as much. So that was really, really insightful. And you might have exaggerated my role a bit in the history of QAMRA, etc. But yeah, somewhere there, but really not as central as you made it out to be. But yeah. So now I invite the panelists on the stage, and maybe we'll just directly open it up for questions, since I think. So we have around half an hour now. So I think we'll just directly go to. I did have some questions, but I think let's open it out to the audience for questions and comments. So should I just take a round of questions to start with? If there aren't, and I can also start. But okay, there are. Okay, great. So there are a couple of questions. So let me take one or two. There's one there and one in front.
Hi, good evening. My name is Loni. So my question might feel long, but it's very important questions. So when you talk about the queer movement and queer rights, you often speak in English. So it's a colonial and hegemonic language. And why, as Uma put it, and real people, the ordinary people, they make distance because they don't understand what's our rights and what's our problems actually. So how come historians, as Michel Foucault puts it in his book, The History of Sexuality, the real history has always been injustice to the real people, because history has always been sponsored by state and it is always writing about queen and kings. So but real history is real people. So how do you develop the linguistics and historian come together, and how do you develop the jargon in native languages so the real people can understand our problems and our rights? The first questions. Second one is, there are a lot of acts, Nalsa Judgment and 2019 Transgender Acts, they have been passed, but every act that has been passed and that becomes again historical documents itself, that goes into the archive. The implementation is a real problem actually. So none of the universities actually have been implemented horizontal reservations and Nalsa Judgment. Till there is no cut-up for IITs and IIMs. Still there is no, and transgender health insurance, Ayushman Bharat, that is not even implemented. 29 is still 6 years. So how do you represent, and how do you historical, and how do you find our representations in political forum, upper house and lower house. One percentage reservation should be there in the parliament and all the assemblies. If Baba Sahib were alive, you would have agreed to this. How to start movement for this and how to bring that reality in the documents, the act, the possible, how to make it really possible. That is what question is. I hope you understood my question.
Do you want to take one more? And then we will.
Thank you. First of all, it was a really, really excellent session. I think with so much diversity in presentation, and we got a lot out of it. So, thank you. My point about QAMRA actually, and maybe even the work at ALF and at the educating students, is that so many, because this is a relatively recent movement, so many of the pioneers, so many of the people who fought, so much of it is still, the individuals are still accessible. You spoke at QAMRA, you want to bring in and engage with people whose work is actually archived in the archive. And that makes it rather distinct from other historical archives in that sense. And so I appreciate the point that QAMRA really wishes to engage with the public and keep this a sort of a living and accessible place of documentation. And I just wanted to know if you have any, wanted to share some thoughts on how you would go about doing that, how you plan to go about doing that.
Okay, so why don't we take some responses from the panel of our speakers on the couple of questions. So does anybody want to start with this?
ಒಂದು ಹೌದು language barriers is there, and also there is class barriers also is there. Not only language, there is class, language, all those things is barriers we have. And yes, we have to understand all the communities' feelings and problems, and we have to bring together, and we have to find some kind of solution how we can fight for our rights. That kind of work we have to do. This is ongoing process. We have to come together, and we have to fight for our inclusivity in not only among the community, in society also we have to fight for that. And other point like transgenders health, see one kind of achievement we had, like before we are seeing before there is no recognition of transgenders health. At least now we have recognition of transgender health. They feel we are also human being. At least we have to thankful to them. But again we have to sensitize them. Before starting the session, I am talking to Manvi. In the Trans Act, Trans Rules, there is one session. They have to mention about state government should take response, not state, all the health department take responsibility to provide SRS and hormone replace therapy and laser and all that they mention. But state, there is no taking responsibility. But our responsibility, we have to pressure to take responsibility from their side. That's why we have to plan how we can go forward it. And already what I talked with Manvi, we can file the RTI wherever they already started or they are not started. If they are not started, what we will do? This kind of discussion we had. But as a community, we have a responsibility, and we are also take responsibility and go forward.
You want to continue?
Yeah. Just to quickly add on to what Umi has already said, the lack of implementation of laws and on the aspect of, in terms of, political representation in, whether it comes to the assembly, why only the parliament, right? Even the assemblies, if you look at it, and the legislative councils, if you look at it. This is a long-term battle, and it has to come with a political impetus as well. This is a question for everyone here, including myself, to reflect on, that when the marriage equality judgment came, right, when you look back at when the recriminalization happened, what kind of outpour of protests were there over the country, right? But when the marriage equality judgment came, saying that there is no right to marriage equality when it comes to the reading of ABCDEFG laws, that protest was not visible, right? Yes, it was live streamed, the court proceedings were live streamed, etc. But that kind of political response was also not there. And I want to also, so there is a kind of work that is there in terms of the legal is always responding to the political. The legal doesn't, at least in my understanding, the legal necessarily doesn't always come first. We work with the community tells us do this and we do that, right? We work saying, okay, maybe this is what we can creatively explore. And so there's a dialogue there. So I really think that more of such collaborations and creative thinking need to be done for the realization of the act. Second, in terms of language, I think the law itself, the fact that the rules came out during the pandemic. And the pandemic, they only came out in English and Hindi. The rules were the draft rules, they never came out in Kannada. So, in terms of the language of also archiving, history, law, there is 100% a need to think about it in Kannada, because this is a continuing conversation, right? About what is it, how shall one refer to person with intersex variations? What is the language for it, right? What is the language for trans persons? Because many words have come and gone, as people like Rumi will tell me and Sunil will tell me. So these are things that we have to constantly be in conversation with, and Kannadalli matadlebeku. Especially places alli matadlebeku, because funders are not excited about giving us money to speak in Kannada. They don't want us to do research production in Kannada. The funders or the money that never wants us to do that. It's that work we have to do from where we are located. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question that you raise about language and sort of the power of language to produce a certain kind of history, and then how do we organize ourselves to push back against that kind of a hegemony. From within the Just Features Collab, for example, we are building, and we have been building, a library ever since the lab started. And the library has material in English because of its ready access, but increasingly in languages such as Kannada, and material from Jiva and the Solidarity Foundation, which are important community resources, also find themselves in the library. There's material that is being added in Tamil, thanks to one of our students who's really looking and partnering with Tirunangai Press in Chennai. And so we bring those materials into the fore. There is material in Hindi from the YP Foundation in Delhi, again thanks to one of the students who's pursuing their work in that context. And there is material in Gujarati from Vikalp, which is an organization in Baroda, which also has archival representation at QAMRA. So we are very conscious of how this library is growing and what kind of knowledges get to be cited, not just those that are published in popular scholarly venues, but much wider range of voices, knowledges, to be able to look at the histories so much more democratically. And that ties into the question that you're asking about the charge of education as to what and how of histories that are still accessible, how do they find themselves? I know the question was more directed to QAMRA, but also I think, for me, thinking about archives, not just from a scholarly perspective, but actually thinking with cataloging and raising questions of its infrastructure, it is also a question of custodianship. That given the fact that the people that you mentioned, the people who are in the room, how do we ensure that the ownership, the sovereignty of that material is preserved? Sometimes people who are creating that material might want to be also the custodians of that material and not necessarily have it housed in a particular institution. So how do we respect and think about post-custodial realities of archives, which democratizes it even more? So that's an ongoing relationship, that's an ongoing question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you to your question of language. This is something that while the QAMRA archive, the material held in the QAMRA archive is multilingual, so we have English, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, Gujarati, some Hindi. The language in which we work, and importantly, the language in which we catalog and our software operates is English. So that's something that we plan to work on in the next few years, is to find a way to translate the catalog and the finding aids so that they can then be read by a wider number of people and make that knowledge accessible. Because the historical material is there in many languages. That the question is how to carry it forward in those languages as well. Yeah, so that's an important point to bring up. And two, how to, I'm trying to remember your question, yeah, so on to your point about that, so we've, what we plan on continuing to do is to try and continue into our schedule, our budget, the logistics for our year, to include the importance of building and continuing relationships with the larger queer community in various ways, whether that be through workshops or whether that be through collecting material in order to, so that the archive can continue to be a site of discussion. So I think what Kush points out is important, is that the question of custodianship is important. And so in order to be custodians of this material, I think it's important that the relationship of trust and also transparency of what's going on at QAMRA continues to take place.
Okay, so shall we take a few more questions? Okay, there are three questions.
I just want to add another point on the question of translation. I think in the history, we've also done the other kind of translation, that is from community, their experiences back to the documentations and the affidavits to the courts, to the various fact-finding reports across India. And I think it's even while it has been one of the most serious critic of being upper class and English focused, the criticism against it has also worked in these many years, where we've had sessions, we've had community meetings, we've had fights also translated. I'm sure some of us will remember how in ALF the fights were being translated because everybody had to speak to everybody, and it was getting translated in at least a minimum of 3 languages. So so the translation has not just been from English to the regional languages, but also from regional languages to English, because a lot of material had to feed in to these systems of law, systems of police, systems of media and things like that, because they had to have sense, and the sense came from the community.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations. I don't know, I was suddenly welling up. I had one sturdy question when I was about to start, but I think listening to the first question, it was very moving also. Because I think each struggle is just not a struggle for, it's not just a struggle of one individual. It's like individual versus systems and conservatism and all that. So it's not a question, but I think I've been, I think I've participated in Kush's lab, and I know what kind of work happens there and the kind of conversations, rich conversations that take place. So I wonder, I mean, how, I think the change that one can see, which is, I don't know, one can, but I think in institutional spaces, the visibility is increasing, and there is, more public scholarship that is also bringing some kind of change in perceptions. But just going back to that question that was asked earlier by them, I feel at all within political systems, social structures, it's a huge task. I think that's where I would really like to hear from you subsequently, not immediately to this question, whether you have any activist strategies, as well, because to bring change, it's individual levels you're doing wonderfully, and at institutional levels there's a bit more work happening. But do you see that, historically, every movement has taken its own time, so do you see any activist strategies taking some kind of manifestation, some kind of sort of form that could bring a much bigger change, whether it's going up to parliament or, in different ways? I don't know, I've just, many things in my head. Thank you.
One more question.
Hi, yeah, thanks a lot for each of your words. It was very, very, very enlightening and enjoyable. My question is to all of you. It's from what you've said so far, I take it that you identify certain obstacles to like indifference or ignorance or money, finance, to doing, being able to preserve and this history going forward. Do you anticipate, or do you identify, or you observe any other obstacles or resistance to continuing and growing this work?
Can I sneak in just one other kind of comment? Actually, I thought of it. I appreciated very much Uma's comment that protest is not just in rally, protest is in documentation, protest is in crisis management, protest is in every range of the way in which you live is part of the protest. So I really appreciated that very much. I wanted to say that in a way, I think when you think about the future, and I'm making a comment, I hope you don't mind, breaking down silos between a different, for example, the fact that you're at MAP, which is an art institution. One point when I was doing some curation of a literary festival, we read out the 377 judgment, or at least a section of it, from Justice Chandrachud. So I think in a way, breaking down silos between art, activism, life, is probably kind of a way to look also into the future. And I see that all of you do that in many ways, but I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's take a round of responses. There are quite a few questions coming our way. So who wants to start with this round?
Okay, I'll try. So I think there was a question from Kiran, but was there a question before Kiran? Was there anyone? I'm sort of blanking out. Rumi's response on translation, which was fantastic. Thank you for that kind of a reciprocity, and I've just made a note of that as well, which also is useful as we push back against thinking about hegemonies in a very simplistic sense, and we think of what that material is doing. So thank you for always sharing such insightful histories. Kiran, your question about activism and where and what form does activism show up in this work? Strategies. continuing strategies of activism. Yeah, so I can talk about the lab. The lab is within the institution, but it is not of the institution, which means that it's not tethered to what the institutional logics are. The institution did not invite me to set up that lab. I set it up because that's the only way I can survive the institution. So there's already that kind of an activist origin to the lab. But I also want to sort of bring up this idea of activism need not always look a certain, in a grand scale of things. And so one of the ways in which I get to sort of practice it and invite students into that conversation is to create a set of educational resources across languages, but across the specificity of thinking with the digital tools and technologies which are at hand, so that we are so much more conscious of the structural impediments to experiencing justice, to experiencing liberation through and through. And always reminding ourselves, as has also been spoken at the panel, that history is not linear. The quote-unquote rights we have won can easily be reversed, and we are seeing it happen globally. So what does it mean to have a different relationship to history, which is not this kind of a linear history, present and past, but really implicate ourselves that are we being conscious enough in terms of our organizing in the moment, but also recognizing, again, this idea of the feminist bricks on which we're building these shelters of liberation. So what that might be. So that's, that perhaps gets to the idea of how to practice activism. The question about challenges, I think it's a fantastic observation that you saw that you named ignorance, indifference, funding as challenges to preservation. What other obstacles remain? I think one of the ongoing obstacles for me is just perhaps the ongoing translation of why memory work matters. I think it's not such an obvious conversation. It's not a default that everybody grapples with the idea of memory work and understands its importance as if it's a day-to-day. So I think how do we creatively, critically bring that to the fore, either through teaching, through active archiving, through legal frameworks. And I'm glad Manvi mentioned how legality itself is a very creative field because you're constantly interpreting. So I think the question of memory work, not to treat that as a given, is important. And hence the kind of the work that requires us to continue to do that. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Okay, Meera, do you wanna?
Sure, yeah. I'll speak briefly to your question about obstacles. I think another obstacle that I see this project facing is just the increasing social isolation and alienation that people experience through political changes, through increasing use of social media, through society, to move away from looking at the importance of community and of collective action towards a more isolated way of being. And I think that moves us further from the importance of memory work and the importance of memory and of the past into a sort of individuated way of understanding things. I think that's a broader obstacle.
Manvi and Uma?
I just want to quickly chip in on the activist strategies questions because I think it's a very good question for everyone who finds themselves as an activist in some way or the other. As a human rights lawyer who works with the community, I think for us, one of the strategies has been the only way you'll understand the limitations and the critiques of the law affect the life of people is when you see it in action. And so one thing we've noticed is through conversations or multiple conversations over what's happened after the Transpersonal Protection of Rights Act came into force in 2019, we've been discussing different provisions of it and saying nothing's happened on this, no complaints ever been filed, nobody's tried getting this implemented. So it came from the critique, it came from the fact that the law itself the way it was passed, how it was not consultative, but that does not mean that we have to completely abandon it, right? The political critique exists. I critique the law, but I also see what of it can be used constructively, and what if it is also a limitation? What if it is completely something that can't be fixed? Like, for example, in the rules, you look at the fact that it asks you to get the certificate from the district magistrate. There's no way in the world for self-identification any of us are agreeing with that, right? But it's something that we also see in Bangalore. How many number of rejections are there, right? That's something to think about, that we all critique the fact that the very point of going to somebody else to, put a signature on an identity is not okay. But how many rejections have happened and what has happened to them, and have they been able to be reversed? So in terms of strategies, I think it's really, one, exploring within the law what's possible and constantly critiquing it. Two is also to keep looking at the intersections between the laws. So if you look at the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or if you look at the Trans Persons Act, or if you look at Juvenile Justice Act, there's overlaps that exist because the law is not, it is not, you're all the same people, right? How caste atrocities, the prevention of atrocities, Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Act that is there, if it's a person from a SC/ST community, and if a caste slur is made, but that recognition of including, okay, the Trans Persons Act also has to be included. So just to think in not a linear, singular dimension, but to also keep looking at the realities which are very layered, for people to make the cases of people who are being targeted stronger. Yeah.
On the point of social isolation, I'm just going to request Umar to speak a little bit about their work on mental health, because they've been doing quite important work around that. So,
ಒಂದು ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ನಾವು ಲೀಗಲ್ ಅಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟು ಮತ್ತು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಗಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇರಬಹುದು, ಅಥವಾ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಆದರೆ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ವಿಚಾರಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಬರೀ ನನಗೆ ಮನೆ ಬೇಕು, ಎಜುಕೇಷನ್ ಬೇಕು, ಇದಿಷ್ಟೇ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ. ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡೋದಾದರೆ ಅಡಾಪ್ಷನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಟುಗೆದರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವಾರು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೀಡ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡುವಾಗ ನಾವು ಜೀವ ಆಗಿ ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 10 ಇಯರ್ಸಿಂದ ನಾವು ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ಜನ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಸೂಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಭ್ಯಾಸಕ್ಕೆ ಒಳಗಾಗ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವರು ಬಂದು ಟೊಬ್ಯಾಕೊ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಡ್ರಿಂಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು, ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಬೋಧೆ ಮಾತ್ರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಂದರೆ ಮತ್ತು ಬರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯಾಬ್ಲೆಟ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋ ಅಂಥದ್ದು. ಈ ಥರದ್ದು ಹಲವಾರು ಇದನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಅವರು ಜೀವನನ ಅವರು ಹಾಳು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದು ಯಾಕೆ ಆ ಥರ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಸೋಷಲ್ ಸ್ಟಿಗ್ಮಾ, ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ನಾಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟೆನ್ಸು, ಮತ್ತು ಹಲವಾರು ನಾವು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿದಂಥ ವಿಚಾರಗಳು ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಇಂಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡುವಾಗ ನಮಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿದ್ದೇನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಹೌದು, ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬರೀ ನಾವು ಕೆಲವೊಂದನ್ನು ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ಟರೆ ಸಾಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾವು ಜೀವ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ನಮ್ಮದು ಬಂದು ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ಲೈನ್ ಇದೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ಗೆ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಆಗಿ, ಅಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಫೀಲಿಂಗ್ ಅಲೋನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಅಥವಾ ಯಾರ ಜೊತೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾದರೂ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತಿದೆಯಾ, ಅಥವಾ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸೂಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತಿದೆಯಾ, ಆ ಥರ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನಮಗೆ ಕಾಲ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ನಾವು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇರ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂಥೇಳಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಬೆಂಬಲವನ್ನು ಕೊಡೋಂಥ ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸುಮಾರು ಅನುಭವಗಳಾಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಸುಮಾರು ಕಾಲ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಮಗೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಬರೀ ಅದು ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿಗಳನ್ನ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಇರೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಮತ್ತು ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ದಿರ ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಟಾರ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಫೋರ್ಸ್ ಮ್ಯಾರೇಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಹೀಗೆ ಹಲವಾರು ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಕಾಲ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಬರೋವಂಥದ್ದು, ಮತ್ತು ಸಪೋರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಆ್ಯಕ್ಷನ್ ರಿಸರ್ಚನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನ ಎದುರಿಸ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ ನಾವು ಅಂತೇಳಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಅನುಭವದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ದಿನನಿತ್ಯ ಸುಮಾರು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನ ಅವರು ಅನುಭವಿಸ್ತಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ಲಿ ರೂರಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಆದರೆ ನಾವು ರೂರಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನ ನಾವು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಅಂದಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅದು ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯಾಬು ಥರನೇ ಅವ್ರು ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ. ನಾನು ಹುಚ್ಚ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅಂದರೆ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅವ್ರ ಮೈಂಡಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೋಂಥದ್ದು ಏನಂದರೆ, ನಾನು ಹುಚ್ಚ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅಯ್ಯೋ ನಾವು ಹುಚ್ಚಿಯಲ್ಲ, ನೀವ್ಯಾಕೆ ಆ ವಿಷಯ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಆ ಥರ ಒಂದು ಬರೋವಂಥದ್ದು ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಆದರೆ ಅವರ ನೋವುಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡೋಂಥದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಲಿಂಕ್ ಆಗುವಂಥದ್ದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದರೆ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಜೀವನದನ್ನ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ ಲಿಂಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯಾಬು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅವರ ಮೈಂಡಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತಿರೋಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೇನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ, ಒಂದು 5 ಡಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ನ ನಾವು ತೊಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಓರಿಯೆಂಟೇಷನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಮತ್ತು ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸಮುದಾಯದವ್ರನ್ನೇ ನಾವು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜನನ, ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಡಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಆರೋಗ್ಯದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ನ ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅವರಾಗಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಕಿಲ್ಸ್ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಉದ್ದೇಶ. ಆ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ.
Okay, so how are we doing on time? Do we have, so 10 more minutes. So we can take, last, okay, there's question at the back. Any more? We can just take a bunch together. Anybody else has any more questions?
Okay, hi.
Okay.
So my question is, ಇವಾಗ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಈವೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗಳಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಭಾಗಗಳಲ್ಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಮ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ NLS, ದೃಷ್ಟಿ, ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ಗಳು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಈವೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಕುಡ್ ಬಿ ಆರ್ಟ್, ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್, ಕಲ್ಚರ್, ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಈವೆಂಟ್, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಎನಿ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಮೇಡ್ ಬೈ ದ ಕ್ವಿಯರ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕ್ವಿಯರ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಅಂದರೆ ಹೌ ಡಸ್ ಆಲ್ ದೀಸ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗೋ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಆರ್ಕೈವ್ ಥಿಂಗ್? ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇವಾಗ ನಾವು ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ, ವೆನ್ ವಿ ಸ್ಪೀಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೆಮರಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಸೊ ಅಂದರೆ ಇವಾಗ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಸ್ಟ್ಗಳು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ನಾವು ಈ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ವಿ, ಅದು ಯಾರು ನೆನ್ಪಿಟ್ಕೋತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ಕ್ವೆಶನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೇಳ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ now in Bangalore there are so many things are happening, so all are important efforts. ಇವಾಗ ಮೇನ್ ಲೀಗಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಟಲ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಲೀಗಲ್ ಬ್ಯಾಟಲ್ಸು, ಅದರಿಂದ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ. See, that's fine. It's a part of social and political movements. So all these unheard efforts, so how do you keep an eye on them and observant of that, and then bring in into the archive, so that no efforts, or at least the noteworthy efforts goes into the archive? I'm just curious. I don't know.
This is something we would like to do better in the future. So we do collect the information from events that happen. Either sometimes people will collect photographs for us, or flyers, or things like that. But that's something that we would like to work on more, actually. And if you'd like to talk to me about it later at greater length, I would love to kind of work out more of the logistics of how it would be possible to capture all the events and activism that's going on in Bangalore today. At the moment, our collecting has kind of slowed a little bit to mostly focus on legal material that continues to come out. But hopefully this will not be a permanent slowing. So.
I just add to that. So it's very challenging given just how much is happening in Bangalore on a daily basis. Literally, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ, I mean, every day, every week, Pride Month had some, I don't know how many events, right? So I think the way that we can do it is more indirectly often, where people who have a record of that, so some organization or platform or a collective that has organized it, we will go and request the organizers, can you please keep, if you have any placards, posters, photos, could you please give it to us? And also the questions of consent, who's there, how comfortable they are there, that's the material is very sensitive. So whether they can give it, but things like placards, etc., it's easier, but photos of people, it becomes a little complicated. Yeah, so often it's done indirectly like that. And then if we are at these events, then we might, we might also make that effort. But yes, so I think it has to be a collective effort where all of you all really should, we would like everybody to be kind of involved in that process and actively which was something that we would urge you. There's very little that we can do as 5, 6, 7 people. Yeah.
Yes. I'll just add to that also, just to give context on how things have been collected thus far, is that, as you said, mostly the way things have been come to us is not that, is through individual people's collections. So people will have collected flyers and then they will give us all their things, and among those things might be documentation of those events. And so we don't aim to create like a complete picture of everything that's going on, because that would be impossible. But hopefully we can, continue to build up a picture through time.
Yeah. Even in that case, the people should be aware of the archiving, bodies, so that even they, when they make a event or something, so at least ಇವಾಗ ನಾವು ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಈವೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದವಾಗ ಒಂದು ಪೇಪರಲ್ಲಿ ಈವೆಂಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ಸೋದು, ನಾಳೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ, ಅಂದರೆ that has been more popularized, or at least people will open the newspaper and then they'll come to the event. So in these cases, so at least all the queer events and the collectives and groups, at least if they know that, okay, who are all the archiving bodies in Bangalore or in India, so that at least one information is being passed. So my question is, so what are the actions like you have been thinking of to make about the QAMRA and any archiving body which is so popular and then reachable, and also how do you spread the information so that it is very popular amongst the common public, so that they have an idea that at least we are doing an event, we are doing some effort which is important, at least they think it's important for the queer community, and then we should also send something to the which is going to the archive.
No, we have to be honest, we have not really gone down that route, but yeah, it's definitely something we should be doing, I suppose, and thinking about it more forward looking, like the way, I think that's a great suggestion. So far it's been more passive, that we collect stuff, we get stuff, but actually actively reaching out, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I also want to add that if any of you in the audience today have a collection of things pertaining to events that have happened and you would like to share it with us, please get in touch and we can continue to build that up.
Can I just quickly add to this conversation, and thanks for sort of raising this larger question of how collections happen. For somebody who's interested in born digital materials which are exclusively born through digital tools that may not have been digitized, I think one of the processes that we did with QAMRA was, what are the physical analog materials and what are their born digital lives, and how do we then think of whether it's your social media profile or whether it's a community organization's own history, and then what becomes of that data. So I think there's a flip side to that question as well. Just because majority of us have smartphones, people think that they're already archiving, but perhaps they're digital cataloging, and so there's also that question of translation, as then how do you move from digital catalogs to archiving, and then what happens to the tremendous amount of born digital material that is out there and yet needs to be respectfully seen with consent, and then what happens to the connections that holdings like QAMRA is currently having with efforts that are happening across the country, institutions, or even in the context of the lab. So that's been a conversation with QAMRA from my end as well. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, so on that note, I think we can bring the session to a close. Thank you so much to all the panelists, to MAP, of course, and to all of you all for being such an engaged audience. Yeah, thank you, and see you soon. Yeah, and there are some booklets from ALF right near the door. You all can pick it up. I think it's somewhere near the door. Where is it kept? Is it there? Yeah, near the door. So please pick, if you all want to, you all can pick those up. Those are for distribution.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for doing this with us. Thank you.